The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Bob Jakowski, and thank you for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you join us for today's webinar. Our topic is to tackle your biggest marketing challenges to revenue growth. This is going to be part of a three-part series, and today we're going to focus on marketing challenges to revenue growth. And specifically, Craig Ramey and myself, we founded this company in 2009. And we've got vast experience that we have working with many B2B clients. And so what's bubbled up to the top is the top 6 marketing challenges that each of you may face today in terms of growing revenue. We're not only going to talk about those challenges today, we're going to talk about the solutions. Solutions that are practical, that can be implemented today, that will help you take away the ceiling that you have in terms of revenue growth and eliminate that ceiling that may exist today. So we're thrilled to have you join us today. This will be an interactive webinar. So throughout the webinar, we're going to have polls. We're also going to ask you to post any questions that you have. So what we always love to do in our webinars is to get to your questions in our Q&A session. And if we get too many questions, we'll make sure we follow up afterwards with you one-on-one. We will be recording today's webinar so that you can look at it for later purposes or share that with colleagues that you have. And of course, we want to make this as beneficial and exciting and invigorating as we can in terms of what you get out of today's webinar. So again, thank you for joining us. Okay. We always like to start off with a poll and a question for the audience. So let me go ahead and launch this if I could and ask you if you'd be kind enough to participate. So when we think about marketing challenges, let us know, and this could be select all that apply. What are the challenges that you envision that you have today in terms of revenue growth? Is it that you're not able to measure your marketing ROI and justify the spend that you have today? Is it that you can't reach your target audience or 100% of your target audience that you have today? Is it that maybe your messages are not resonating with your decision makers that you're selling to? Is it perhaps that you're not able to sustain demand? We often hear from people that they have periodic demand, but it spikes and then it goes down, spikes again, and goes down. And so a big issue for them may be that they need consistent, predictable demand. And another issue that you may find is that you create these phenomenal assets in marketing, but they're not used by sales or by your partners. So go ahead if you could and let us know your thoughts, and we'll share the results of this poll as we conclude this in a few minutes here, or in a few seconds. Okay, we'll keep it open for just a couple more seconds here. And again, thank you everybody for participating. It helps us really focus our session today on what's important from your perspective. Okay, let me go ahead and close this, and I'll share the results with everyone. So 17% of you stated that major challenge would be unable to measure marketing ROI. 67%, the next two, that you're not able to reach your target audience or that your messaging is not resonating with your target audience. 33% stated that you have the challenge of sustainable demand for your organization. So thank you for participating in that. We appreciate that. We'll have another poll later on as we go through today's webinar. So as I mentioned earlier, as we started, we have a three-part webinar series for you. What we've looked at is the key challenges that companies have, B2B companies have, in terms of revenue growth. And we've broken this down into 3 areas. Today, we're going to talk about those that are marketing challenges. Next month, we're going to talk about what do you do when you have an avalanche of leads or opportunities, yet you basically have to figure out how do you develop those. So one of the keys that you'll find with B2B companies, the national stat, is that only about 5% of the leads that you create are sales ready or sales qualified. That means 95% are not. So in our next webinar in July, we're going to talk about what do you do with those leads to actually get them to that point where they are ready to go through the evaluation with you and become a customer. And then in August, we're going to talk about from a sales perspective, what are the top challenges. So we look forward to you joining us for the webinar series that we have here today. Two slides I'd like to share with you about our agency. We are a revenue acceleration agency that Craig Remini and I founded, again, back in 2009. And there's a lot of things that it takes to help you achieve your revenue growth goals. And I'll just walk you through the wheel here quickly, give you a sense about the things that we do. We help companies really think through strategically where they're going and what they're trying to accomplish. So in some cases, it may be in number one, your strategy is to increase revenue by 30% year over year. It may be also that you decide you want to go and win the healthcare market, as an example. It may be that you want to recruit 20 sell-through partners this year, and that's where you're seeing most of your growth. So the strategy that you have may be different. That's number one. Number two is we've created a revenue acceleration system. It's the unification of best practices for you across this revenue creation process so that you ensure that you're scaling all of the vectors for revenue growth. Number three is expertise. When we built the company, we realized that many of you today may not have all the resources you need to internally to get your job done. So rather than just give you a playbook and best practices, we also provide the resources and the know-how to get the job done too. Number four is infrastructure. Infrastructure is something that we've decided to put in with best practices, not just to turn it on, but actually help you utilize it the best way possible. And this is really important from an infrastructure perspective because everything is digitally based today. So it's not only about putting in a marketing automation system to track all of your prospects, your buyers, the behavior, the scoring that needs to be happening, and also your CRM system with best practices. We also added two other capabilities that you typically don't find in the marketplace. One we're going to share with you today called a sales-driven website, which guides your buyer through the buying process, accelerates your sales. And another one is called OneSource, which is how do you take all of these sales tools and assets that you created and organize them specifically to accelerate the sales process. Number five is putting in a revenue acceleration engine. And we've got different levels that we have. Some of you may be in the early stage and you're looking at creating demand for your solutions and you're at an early stage. Some of you may be scaling. You may be in a mid-market company saying you need to scale and grow the company at 30, 40, 50% per year. And some may be at the public level or the enterprise level. And you're really looking at, again, having that predictable, sticky revenue growth that you're looking for every year so that you can keep the markets happy. Number six is innovations. We're going to share some of those innovations with you today, but it's all about doing something out of the box, something new and innovative in terms of revenue growth. When Craig and I were the CEO and the CMO for a company called Intact, software as a service company, we started building out what you see here today, which is the revenue acceleration system. And this is what we help companies put in place today. Now, the good news at Intact is we are very successful at scaling the company as operators, as you are all operators today. And scaling the company and having the success we had, and then having the Sage company come in and buy the company for $850 million. So very successful in terms of growth, very successful in terms of outcome. But what I like to draw your attention to on the bottom here is the three funnels. So this one, think about this as the first funnel, which is the marketing funnel. This is your lead development funnel, and this is your sales funnel. One of the keys is to develop healthy three funnels that are full, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but the key here is you don't need just a sales funnel, you need all three funnels. So if you think about this, that's how we've dedicated our series. Today is talking about marketing. How do you create the demand that you're looking for? because this is really the flywheel for the business to get everything started. The middle funnel is how do you convert that demand or interest into becoming qualified to engage and to qualified to evaluate and buy your service or solution today. And then finally, it's sales. How do you create the accelerated engagement process for your buyer to take them through each of the steps that are necessary for them to become a customer? So this is a connected process, and that's how we've established our series. So here are the top 6 marketing challenges we're going to address today. And I'll just bring these up for you. And what we're going to do is talk about what's the challenge, why is it important? And then Craig and I are going to talk about how do we address that from a solution perspective. So we've got a lot of experience doing this, and the things I'm going to share with you today are not theoretical. They work every day in practice, and you can also apply them for your company and achieve success. So let's start off with the first one. This is something you hear from everyone, which is, I need to create sustainable demand for our sales organization, for our partners, and so forth. That's the number one request you always hear from your sales organization is, I need more leads. And so it's really important to say, what is the number of leads that you need? And the second question that typically comes up is, I need better leads. So once you get the leads that you're looking for, the number, if you will, the quantity, the question is, how do you get the quality you're looking for? So we're going to address that today as we talk about that. And the third question you always get from the sales organization is, I need leads that are better educated or better at their position to buy from me. So this is the first challenge that you always have to revenue growth, which is it's a lead volume issue that you're dealing with, and you've got to be able to put your arms around that and to master that, not only for the quarter, but for the year and for the life of your company. What we help companies do is put in what we call a revenue acceleration engine. So as you can imagine, an engine, just like an engine on your car or your boat, it's one of those things that there are a number of components. All the components have to work together for the engine to function and to scale and to accelerate. And so I'm going to very briefly touch on 8 of these components. When we help a client put this in and put in their engine, it is really taking them through that process and ensuring that everything's in place, everything is scaling, everything works. If you visited our website, you'll notice the video on the homepage, and the gentleman that is on the homepage, his name is Ray White. Ray is the Chief Marketing Officer for ICUC, a global social media management services company. When he came to a webinar just like today's webinar, his challenge was, I need to scale, and our marketing team is doing a great job taking us and creating, let's say, 30, 40, 50 leads per month. But because of the growth goals that we have, we need to figure out how to scale and grow and get 250 leads per month. So not 50, but 250. And so what we helped Ray do and his team is put in our revenue growth, revenue acceleration engine, and to achieve that every month and be consistent. So the 8 areas is really being intentional about the revenue engineering process. How many MQLs, SQLs, and leads and deals do you need on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? We're going to talk about something about outcome-focused messaging for decision makers. We're going to talk about getting in the head of your decision maker. And we're going to talk also today about reaching 100% of your target audience. We also, as part of this, help implement a marketing automation system. And from that upfront information, we create what we call a prospect engagement roadmap to actually engage your buyer through the entire buyer's journey and to enable your sales organization to have the right sales tools to take that buyer through that journey. So this is about putting in an engine. And that's really the first thing, which is once you put the engine in place, you understand how to scale it. You understand how to give the sales organization the leads that they need, both the quantity and quality. Now, because this is today's webinar, there's only so much time we have to cover each one of these 6 areas. So what I would suggest is after today's webinar, if there's an area of particular interest for you, let's set up a one-on-one call with Craig and I, and let us walk you through a little bit about how to brainstorm in this area that you have a challenge in, and then what kind of solutions you can put in place today to achieve that success. The second challenge from a marketing perspective when you're thinking about revenue growth is that sometimes your messaging or positioning is not resonating with your decision makers. So the question is, how do you determine what's important with your target audience? You may come up with lots of different areas that you can help somebody address, both tactically and strategically, but you need a way to vet that out. You need a way to validate that. What we also find in many cases is the messaging is what we call seller-based, not buyer-based. Messaging, for instance, if you sold a human resource system, would be about the capabilities of your human resource system. However, if you were talking to the VP of HR, what that person may say is, I'm really concerned about how I'm managing and scaling my talent at my organization today. So that's the buyer-based versus the seller-based. One of the things that we do to get from here to there is we help companies go through what we call a strategic messaging workshop and develop outcome-based or outcome-focused messaging. Think about this as 4 elevators here today. We'll cover the next 2 down the road here, but let's cover 4 today. And where everybody starts off with when you have a solution or a service is, what does your solution or service provide? So a lot of the messaging that we see when we initially engage with a client is really great messaging around features, capabilities, benefits for the customer. And that's good. And that's good to be in a situation where you've got that mastered. However, if you want to elevate the value of your service or solution for your target audience, we need to go to the next floor. And the next floor is focusing in on what are the business challenges or pains that you address. If that's the headache, then what's the aspirin? Well, obviously, it's your service or solution that's the aspirin. So connecting the two together and really making sure that we've fully vetted out all of the business challenges that you address and all of the value propositions that you provide. So that takes us to what we call level 2, which is the focus on value. If we want to go next to the next level, then we're going to focus on level 3. Level 3 is, how do you optimize a specific valuable, vital process for your client? So it may be a financial management process. It may be an analytical process. It may be a customer service issue. But whatever it is, what is it that you do that's going to help them streamline, accelerate, and optimize that process? And so that's something we see over and over again, is taking it up to a more strategic level for that company. And at the 4th level, we're really talking about, at the 4th level, what we're really talking about here is the most strategic level, which is messaging at delivering outcomes or ROI, return on investment. So as you can see, these 4 levels are all interrelated, but they all graduate in terms of importance to the customer. The more that you can message about your solution or service at a strategic level in terms of the return on investment and the outcomes you're going to deliver for that customer, the more valuable you're going to be to that customer and to what they need. So that takes us through the second challenge, which is making sure that you're going through the messaging process to go from the tactical to the strategic. Once you do that with a strategic messaging workshop, though, The question is, how do you get the validation you're looking for from your target audience? So the next area that we look at to solve that is to gain validation by conducting a buyer intelligence survey with your target audience. It's really a fantastic way for you to take the information that you know and say, now, if I had 20 value propositions or 20 challenges that we can solve, what would be the top ones that would rank the top with our target audience? So think about getting 50 decision makers in a room and asking them that question and getting them to weigh in on all these things that we have here on the bottom of the slide. And once you do that, it allows you then to take that information and say, we've already gone through the messaging workshop, we've gone through the survey, and now what we need to do is we need to craft all that information into a prioritized, what we call a core messaging document. And once you do the survey, you can then distill that information, prioritize it, and you can use it with your sales team, with the sales conversations. You can use that with your marketing efforts in terms of how you're going to message on your website and how you're going to take people through the buyer's journey. And you can use that in terms of your demand generation campaigns and vehicles that you're going to use throughout the next 12 to 24 months. The manifestation of that may be infographics showing how you optimize a process. It could be a success story. How are your customers achieving success with your service today? Webinars like today's webinar, in terms of fully vetting out the complete set of ideas for your target audience and giving them the understanding and the best practices that they need today to be successful. So that's the first two challenges. Craig is going to walk you through challenges 3 and 4.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Bob. So when we get to ROI, so as Bob introduced me at the very beginning, I am a serial CMO and have worked in Silicon Valley for most of my career. And Bob, I did start the company 13 years ago with the intent of helping B2B companies really expand in this area of growth. And part of that growth and part of that expansion is really has a foundation in ROI. So the big question is why are you doing this? And the key thing is optimizing spend. So when we think about marketing spend and ROI, 80% roughly of your marketing budget will be spent on programs. And when you think about that, you want to optimize that the best you can. And this is where most companies fall down. And I'm going to get into some of the details and some of the pitfalls that you can avoid and some of the advantages of working with us in the potential future that can help you. So when we talk about where and how to invest, one of the things that Bob talked about earlier was survey work and understanding who your buyer is, understanding not only who your buyer is from a horizontal standpoint, but also within each of your verticals. It's very important to understand that because as we think about the marketing ROI, which we're going to get into, the programmatic spend, which accounts for effectively 80% of your marketing budget, that program spend will in fact be different for each one of your verticals. And there is an immediate preference to just do a one-size-fits-all. I want to send out effectively the same message or maybe a variation of the message to the same exact lead channels. And it will impact your ROI, and we're going to get into that. So Bob, let's go to the next slide, please. So we talked about, and I mentioned earlier about the programmatic spend being 80% of your budget. When you think about the big chunks of your budget, while there are many nuances to this, I tried to streamline it for the sake of this webinar. There are really 3 major areas. There's going to be strategic branding and messaging component of your budget. There's going to be a base spend of building the infrastructure of your budget, and then there's going to be a programmatic spend of your budget. And roughly, as a rule of thumb, I come in and approach it as 80% of your spend is going to be in programs, 15% is going to be spent in your base infrastructure building, and another 5% or so is going to be spent on your strategic messaging, positioning, and branding. But when you begin to think about that and look at it, the two items on the left truly fundamentally have to be done, and then and we're going to get into ROI, but those are effectively a set amount, and then we get to the program spend. That's going to be very much variable on our moving forward plan. So Bob, let's go forward and I'll get into some of the detail. All right. So when this is something we're asked a lot. So companies say, well, how much do I spend on marketing? How much should I invest? And yes, there's a rule of thumb there, and this is, you can look up this number and it's going to vary. Some people say it's 7%. It's going to be 10%. It is an equation that is difficult to pin down. At a minimum, you should be spending 5 to 10% at an absolute minimum. But it really depends on the stage you are in the life cycle of your company and what your immediate goals are. And I'll just throw in some examples. One example, Salesforce. When Salesforce started in 99, 2000, and they were ramping up, Mark Benioff was spending upwards of 65% of his total company budget in marketing, and very little on the development of the solution. And the reason is his strategy was market acquisition. And so while you had this industry rule of thumb, this was completely thrown out because the strategy that Mark Benioff had at the time completely ran counter to that. Now, most companies can't do that. But at a minimum, what we advocate is you should be in this range, in the 5 to 10%. But again, it depends on the life cycle of the stage of your life cycle of the company, as well as what your immediate goals are for the company in the next 1 to 3 years. And then not only that, when we think about on the bullet number 2, we talk about a revenue engineering model. It's very, very important to get into a planning component of your marketing spend, since it is 80% of your budget. Get into a planning phase of working backwards from what's your goal to how you're going to achieve that goal. We have a very, very refined process for how to get there. And we'll talk about that later. Let's go to the next slide, Bob. So there are different types of ROI in marketing, and I won't spend too much time on it, but I will just point out these 4. So there's a programmatic ROI, and that's just looking at the program spend. There's a full marketing loaded ROI. There's a product launch ROI, which is focused on a specific entrance of a new product or potentially into a new vertical. And then there is an ROI, which we associate to a sales-driven website, and how that sales-driven website can actually streamline and reduce the total CAC. Bob, let's go forward, please. And this just is a real quick spreadsheet. This is super streamlined. I didn't want to show on in our presentation the more blown out spreadsheet, but it's very simple. It's about tracking budget to opportunity value to close value, and tracking that on a year-over-year analysis, so that we can begin seeing the trends at not only the macro level, but we can dive in lower and look at the specific lead channels and how they are improving or failing on any given year-over-year trend. Bob? All right. So the next part of this, and I talked about, that's kind of the basics of the math, and I breeze through this, but we could spend hours if you want to have another conversation with Bob and I afterwards. We can spend hours talking about the proper way of setting up ROI, looking at your specific situation. But let's move on to the buyer's journey. So one of the more important things to building out the ROI and delivering ROI is putting in place the buyer's journey. Now, why is that? So it's not enough to have the right messaging. It is not enough to have the right lead channels. What is important here is that you present the right narrative. So when I speak about that narrative is broken down into a series of chapters, and those chapters then are delivered to the audience as they are consuming the next stage. So when they're just researching or they are just doing assessments, there are a certain amount of information, certain types of information that we should be distributing to them. As we move them along the buyer's journey, there are case studies that should be given at the right time. There are other types of sales tools, such as ROI guides. There are explainer videos. Each one of these has an important aspect and value to the buyer's journey, and it needs to be delivered at the right sequence. Not only from in the sales department, but into the buyer-driven website. Those two sales processes, both on the automated version of the buyer-driven website, should actually be aligned to what your salespeople are doing on those individual personal calls. So let's go forward, Bob, and we'll talk about this in more detail. Perfect. Now, this is a great quote. So according to the corporate executive board, 65% of the sales cycle was completed before the prospect talks with a sales executive. All right, so let's translate that. They've done their research. They've done their Google searches or their Bing searches. They've done an assessment. They've probably talked to your competitors. They have a lot of knowledge. Your job is to get in front of them with your buyer journey to influence that sales cycle, so that when we think about that quote again, 65% of the sales cycle is completed before the prospect talks to the sales executive. If this is true, which I do believe it is, then your job in marketing is to get in front of this quote and to influence them with the buyer's journey that you set out. And you need to do the preference setting with your material rather than a competitor doing the preference setting with their material. Okay? It's the basic concept. So let's move on, Bob. All right, so here is a buyer's journey model. So I just want to go through this really quickly. There are multiple stages in this, and we have several different models which we apply to the buyer's journey for different companies, and the buyer's journey may in fact be different for a different vertical and depending on your specific product. But there is a basic model for which we, when we do engage and help you set that up, there is a model. We come in and say, structure it this way. This will be optimized. Now let's look at some specific nuances that apply to your solution, that apply to any one of your verticals, that apply to the particular roles that you're speaking to. So while the buyer's journey can in fact shift, and it should shift a little bit, the basic model is effectively the same. And we've got this, so we've been building these for many, many years and perfecting these, and we know exactly the type of content to deliver along each one of these steps. So Bob, let's go forward. All right, here is an example of, I'm going to show you two examples. This first example is a buyer's journey on a website, Technical Toolboxes. This is a B2B company. They provide software solutions to the oil and gas industry in Texas. And you can see here under there is a buyer's journey at not the top menu, but the second menu where overview, challenges, solutions, FAQs, clients, and next steps. So the goal here, and this is all on one page, and the goal here is to present the information how they would normally consume it. Now, as part of that consumption, there are many CTAs and engagement activities along the way. But this is just a quick example. Let's go to look at another example, Bob. All right, so here's another software company. They provide human resource software. And again, we've got our buyer's journey. In the case of visibility software, we have the overview, challenges, solutions, FAQs, clients, and next steps. So, and they've got a different buyer's journey with different CTAs for each one of their solutions. And so as we think about these buyer journeys, they are in fact different. They are in fact for each one of your solutions. You may in fact have unique ones for different roles. But the basic model is the same, but the content the content that is being delivered is unique under each one of those verticals, and this should be aligned to exactly how your salespeople are engaging your audience. So these two things should be aligned. There shouldn't be any daylight between them. So I'm sure you have many questions on this, and we certainly can answer additional questions later on, but I will hand this back to Bob.
Thanks, Greg. So just as a process check, we've covered 4 of the challenges. We're going to cover 2 more now in marketing that you have to revenue growth. Number 5, and this was reflected in the survey that we started earlier in our conversation today, the poll that we took, is many of you may find it's difficult to reach your target audience. As we have engaged with executives all over the world and in North America in workshops, what we found is that many of them, when asked this question, believe that their company is engaging about 10% of the target audience. In some cases, it may be less. If they're in a very small vertical or refined segment, it could be more. But the challenge with this is your prospect can't buy from you if they don't know you exist, and they surely can't buy from you if they don't understand the value that you can bring to them. So it's really important to have what we call a reach strategy so that you can reach 100% of your target audience. So one of the things that we do to actually do that is we work with our clients to really understand the target audience that you're trying to reach, and then what's the right vehicle to enable us to have the individual contacts that we need, both the influencers, the decision makers, and all the stakeholders that are involved. You may think about using a database like ZoomInfo or Apollo.io, which are 2 that we work with, 2 that many of our clients have. In fact, we're a partner with both of them. And those are great databases. There are going to be cases, though, where you can't find what you're looking for in that audience. So, for instance, one of our clients is focusing on the franchise industry. And so there's not a NAICS code or SIC code for franchise. So what we've done instead is we've helped them find the list of all the franchises, figure out the stakeholders, and then actually build that list. So we've been building the list for them so that they can reach 100% of the franchise executives that they need to reach this year. So it's really going to be important, even though this is just sometimes considered plumbing. It stops you from achieving your potential when you can't reach your target audience. And so there's a way to get to number 5 here and to have a strategy that we always implement with our clients to help them achieve that. Number 6 is thinking about, from a marketing perspective, who's your customer? Your customer is your sales organization. So if you think about that, you say, what is it that we need to do to make sure that sales succeeds? Now, the company succeeds if you exceed your revenue goals each and every quarter throughout the year. And that's because your sales organization is going to be successful, as well as if you sell with partners. However, the sales organization, their success is going to be foundationally dependent upon the marketing team, the marketing success that you have, which this really gets to today's conversation, which is making sure that from a marketing function perspective, you've got all of the capabilities, the tools, the assets, the best practices to actually help your company scale and succeed. So the steps that would come out of today, in today's discussion, that you can think about is, number 1, having the ability to create the right quantity and quality of market qualified leads. And if you look at this, you can actually conduct what we call revenue engineering and figure out what are the number of leads that you need in any given sector, vertical, and so forth, to support the sales and revenue contribution for the company. Another thing that Craig walked you through is what we talk about our sales-driven website, and that's to accomplish all the front-end education and preference setting that's really important for your audience as you move forward. Because every time somebody comes to the website, you have that moment of truth to convert them from being a visitor to a prospect. The third is mapping the needed sales tools for each stage of the buyer's journey. That's great in terms of what your champions are going to need from you as they move through that journey. It's great for your sales organization because they really have the tools that they're going to need to be successful. Now, one of the ways we think about this differently, perhaps than other companies, is we actually start with sales and work our way backwards. What that means is your sales organization is going to need a certain set of tools and assets to be successful in executing the sales process. Many of those offers, like a buyer's guide, like an ROI guide, like a recorded demonstration, are things that you can use both in marketing in terms of your marketing campaigns, as well as sales to actually support and enable the sales process. So we think that there's a dual purpose when you think about what you're going to create. And then number 5 is organizing all of those tools, those assets that you need by stage for your buyer. And one of the solutions that Craig and I have created is what we call OneSource. So OneSource is something that's used by all of our clients to organize all of the sales tools by each stage of the buyer's journey, by each stage of the seller's journey, so that you can actually see what you need to have available to you. And by giving the organization powerful capabilities to filter, you can choose all of the assets and the tools that you're going to need. It could be based upon where you are in terms of the journey that you're enabling for both the prospects, for customers, for partners. It could be based upon the industries. So you may have, for instance, we have one client that is focusing on a number of industries, one of them being nonprofits. And so we aggregate all of the nonprofit sales tools for them easily so they can see how to use those for that industry. By function, by program, by client, by best practice. So you really have an opportunity to organize information efficiently for your organization. And then finally, with a solution like OneSource, you can share branded information with your prospects and constituents. So in this case, we're taking a number of different infographics and a number of different informational items that we have for Transpera, and enabling that to be shared easily and consumed easily by the audience. A very powerful tool to be able to have at your disposal. So with that, we've covered the 6 major challenges, and what we like to do now is get your takeaway from today's webinar. So if you could, please take time and help us understand, now that you've had an opportunity to participate in today's webinar for the first 45 minutes, what's your major takeaway? Is it to have a strategy to reach your entire audience? Is it to put in a revenue acceleration engine like we talked about? Is it to validate your messaging and assumptions? Are they looking to map the buyer's journey for all your visitors? Or is it really focused around better ROI from marketing? And again, this is one of those select all that apply. So appreciate you determining what's most important from your perspective. Okay, we'll just keep the poll open here for just a couple more seconds, and appreciate everybody weighing in and giving us your important input. Okay, let me go ahead and share this information with everyone. Thank you for responding. Okay, 45% of you said that putting in a revenue acceleration engine for sustainable and consistent demand creation is really the top most important area. 18% stated that validating your messaging and assumptions, like we talked about earlier, with a buyer intelligence survey would be a good vehicle for that. 27% stated that mapping the buyer's journey for all your visitors, and that could be also customers. It could also be for partners. And then 9% stated that better measure for your marketing ROI is important. So thank you for participating in the survey. Appreciate that, and appreciate the opportunity to share that with you. What we'd like to do right now is just open up for questions that you may have for Craig and I. We'd like to take a number of questions from the audience, and then we could talk about next steps that would be available for you. So we're here to help you be tremendously successful this year and in every year going forward. So anything that we can do to facilitate that is important from our perspective. One of the questions that we were asked, and this one is by Jim, he says he missed the beginning, but wanted to know if we would be sharing the slides and have access to a copy, and the answer is yes. What we're going to be doing is presenting to you a recorded version of today's webinar, so you have that available to you. If you want to revisit it, share it, and have it. Let's go to the next question here. Okay, this one is from Drew. Drew says, how long does it take to put in a revenue acceleration engine before you see the results? Craig, did you want to give you some thoughts on that? Okay.
Having audio problems on this side, Bob. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, so the question that Drew asked is, how long does it take to put in a revenue acceleration engine before you see the results?
Sure, absolutely. So there's really several major components. When you think about the revenue acceleration engine itself, one of the things we're going to do is start putting in the infrastructure immediately. But in parallel to that, we're going to work with you to build out a messaging document for which we'll begin doing campaigning. So when we think about results are measured across a lot of different things. So results in building the infrastructure and putting in the basics and so forth are done in the first quarter. In parallel to that, we'll start messaging around what you currently have in your best messaging within that first quarter. Then as we get more information with the survey work, then that will come in the next couple quarters with refining the messages and getting out some of the buyer content along the buyer's journey that we talked about.
Okay, great. The next question is from Sarah. Sarah says, can we do this survey ourselves, or is it better to work with a third party? Let me go ahead and answer that question, Sarah. A good question, as we talked about the buyer intelligence survey. So what we find with surveys is not just doing the survey, it's the essence of the survey is the ability to ask the right questions in the right way. But the other thing that's important that we find is that we conduct a survey for our clients, and we've done hundreds of these surveys. The value of it is having a third party do it. And the reason why it makes sense is if you do it, if they know the survey is coming from you, chances are you're going to bias the survey results before you even begin, because they're going to look to see who you are and how to answer the questions the way they think you want them answered. If you do it through a third party like On Demand Advisors, it gives an opportunity for you to have a third party go out and do the survey work for you and then bring the results back to you and your team. Okay. Here's another question, and this one is let's see, this one is from Ted. Ted says, what's the best way to get an opinion on my marketing challenges?
I can answer that one, Bob. So the best thing to do is talk to us about your overall strategy, and then we can back into what your challenges are from our perspective. And I would strongly lean on our decades of experience and working with hundreds of companies to see patterns over and over again. Because sometimes what people think are the challenges are actually not challenges that exist.
That's good. Let's go for a couple more questions here before we wrap up. Here's a question from Raj. Raj says, does your approach work with small companies as well as large companies? And the answer is yes, Raj. Good question. What we found is basically this approach has worked with all size companies, from startups all the way through public companies. And if you look at the who's who of the companies we've served, obviously we've served many startups, mid-stage companies, as well as large companies like the Oracles, the SAPs, many large companies out there that we've worked with. So it works just as well in both size companies, but thank you very much for that question. Next question is from Karen, and perhaps you can answer this one for her, Craig. If we leverage a sales-driven website, do we need to start over?
Just starting over, if I understand the question correctly, you don't need to start over if we have much that can be worked with. It can actually be integrated effectively, the process and so forth, to what you have. But I think the best approach would be to take a step back and see what there is, what's salvageable. Sometimes it makes the most sense to integrate it in. Sometimes it makes most sense to build it from scratch.
Okay, good deal. Okay, let's talk about, if we could, what's coming up as far as the next set of webinars that are part of this three-part series. So in July, our next webinar is going to be focusing on the lead development challenges that you have to revenue growth. And see, these are some of the areas we're going to cover, which is, leads are not converting into sales opportunities. You need to get better offers to help move prospects through each stage and so forth. So we're going to cover that and talk about best practices just like we've done today from a marketing perspective. And then in August, we hope you'll join us for the August webinar on August 24th. And we're going to talk about the challenges that sales has and how you can overcome and address those challenges. All of these webinars are posted on our website. And as we follow up with you after today's webinar, we'll also make sure we send you a link not only to the recording from today's webinar, but also the link to register for these webinars coming up. Finally, what we'd like to say is some next steps. What are some next steps you could take from today's webinar? Well, we talked about the 6 challenges from a marketing perspective for revenue growth. And if any one of those resonate, or a number of them resonate with you today from today's webinar, let's go ahead and set up a 1-hour meeting. And Craig and I would be happy to talk you through the challenges that you have today, talk about options that you have, because it's all about getting the right set of options on the table, and then thinking through what's the best way to address that challenge and achieve your success. So this is about a success plan for 2023 and 2024. And that's ultimately what we'd love to help you do as we move forward. Here's the contact information for myself and for Craig. You're welcome to visit our website. Welcome to give us a call anytime. And we appreciate your attendance and participation in today's webinar. We thank you for that valuable input. We thank you for sharing your thoughts, challenges, and opportunities. And on behalf of Craig, myself, and the entire On Demand Advisors team, we thank you for joining us and wish you a fantastic day.